think we're ready to go. Thank you for your patience. I just want you to know, anybody was feeling anxiety during this 20 minutes, you're probably white. I know the Indians in the audience are like, well, we still got a couple more hours before this really needs to start, you know? Okay, we're going to go through a couple of things here, and I'll try to do it fast. I want to thank our sponsors, Humanities Montana, University of Montana, Pleiades Foundation, Montana Arts Council, American Prairie, Stockman Bank, and also just all of the remarkable number of individual donors who donated through the website. We had donations that ran from, $1 to, $1,000, $1,500, and those donations have been coming in pretty steady ever since we put the website up a couple months ago. We're all deeply grateful for these donations because there's no way this festival happens without that. We can't bring these writers in. We can't rent this incredible venue. We just, nothing happens without those donations. And so I just want to say thank you to everybody for that. I want to also thank the organizing committee again. I had people during this last few days coming up and, shaking my hand and saying, thank you so much for doing this and so on and so forth. But the reality is that this was originally my vision, but nothing happens without all the people here, everybody on the organizing committee, all the people that donated hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of their time over the last year and a half to make this happen. That would be Lois Welch, obviously. This thing doesn't happen without her blessings. I still remember very clearly I think just before Christmas in December of 2020, when I decided to finally see what would happen if I just called her up and talked to her about this, and because obviously this doesn't happen without her wanting it to happen. And she was I was standing out in front of Cassiopeia Books actually in Great Falls when I called her, and that first conversation we had went about an hour and a half. And by the end, I knew that we were, on our way to getting going on this thing. Kim Anderson, who ran the Missoula Book Festival for a long, long time, and is an expert in these things. And I could not have done anything that I did personally in terms of what I did for this festival. I could not have done any of it without her. Kim, thank you for dealing with my phone calls. It's like the number, and then probably I think there was an inverse relationship between the closer we got to the festival and how much Kim liked me, and it was like the festival, they kind of went like this, and I had the number of times that Kim had took phone calls from me on the fly. It was, thank you so much. Ryan Lenz, who it was just, kind of everything in a way. He did all the social media, put the website together, had to deal with me saying, no, I need that moved over one space, and then he'd move it over and one more, and then I go, no, back one. I don't know if any of you have ever done web design, but it sucks. And he had to deal with that, and also just, he did all, taking care of all the writers, with plane ticket, just everything, did a remarkable amount of work. April Cipher, Adrian Jawart, Heather Cahoon, even though Heather kind of, is Heather out? Heather's not out there, is she? Who am I missing? And then Chris Latre for a while before he got scared of me, all of you, dealing with meeting over Zoom for a year and a half. Jesus, Zoom. I don't know. Zoom is like kind of like Bluetooth. It should just be way cooler than it is, but it's not. And that's how we met. I was across the country all winter, and and that's how this happened. Was people being willing to meet, on Mondays, every once a month, and then as we got closer, every other week. And it was I'm so grateful to all of you for everything that you did to help make this happen. Our volunteers, where are our volunteers? Cheer for yourselves. the volunteer committee, which came together out of nowhere, a bunch of students came up from the Institute of American Indian Arts, drove up here just for this festival. An amazing group of young writers. They came up here to see all these other writers that some of whom they've already worked with at IAI, and I had no idea how important the volunteer committee was until this actually started. And I want to thank particularly Shelby Fitzpatrick for being strangely motivated. I don't have any idea why you wanted to do this, but she just immediately turned into somebody that I started handing off responsibilities to over the past week, and she killed it. So thank you so much, Shelby. I want to thank the writers, the writers who came to this thing. You've all been incredibly generous with your words and your time, and putting up with having cameras in your face. And I know it's not the most fun thing in the world, but so we're just I'm grateful for the the sacrifices that you made to help make this happen. Do I want to thank the audience yet or not? No, I don't. Chris talked about these kids a little bit earlier. We've got a group of upward bound kids here from up north, and I'm just, yeah. I talked about this with you a little bit, yesterday morning, and I won't get too far into it, but well, I will actually, but in a moment I will. But to me, even though it's just a relative handful of you right now, as we go forward with these festivals, it has always been my goal to make young people the center of this festival. This is really ultimately, and it's here for you. The writers are here for you. This festival is here for you, and so I just thank you, Katie, for bringing them down. Thank you for being here. Yeah. Yep. And the thing that's amazing to me is that when I started talking about this, and I mentioned that I was going to run this festival to my dad, and I started talking about it, and he said, I think I knew that guy. And he's like, did he have glasses? And I was like, yeah, he's like, that guy was my upward bound counselor. So Jim was actually my dad's upward bound counselor. And and what he remembered, believe it or not, is what everybody else remembers. He said, he was a really nice guy. He was really good to me. So there's something coming full circle here. I'm not really sure what it is, but that's how it feels to me. Really quickly here, I want to talk about just a couple threads, why I wanted to start this in the first place. One of them is that after I read Winter in the Blood in 2011, and I was blown away by that book, and I really wondered, why is there no? And I started to wonder, there's a public conversation about Momaday's work, and there's a public conversation about Silko's work, but there was no public conversation about Jim's work, especially then. Nobody was talking about his work, and it was amazing to me. And so it's been at the back of my mind for a long time. Is there some way that I can do something about that? Is there some way that we can, collectively open that conversation? And And as I said, before earlier today, one of the reasons for that is because behind, when it comes to like Native writers, in my experience anyway, and this is not a comment against any other Native writer, but more often than not, it's Jim's work that we end up talking about when we're talking about like who is it we're looking toward to help us understand how to do what we're doing. So I wanted to see if I could do something about that, and I think we have. I also wanted to create a space where Native writers could talk with each other the way they wanted to talk. And what's going to happen here in a little bit is essentially the culmination of that idea. I've never been in a situation where a group of Native writers or artists could have a conversation with each other and be moderated by a Native moderator and just speak as they wanted to speak about what they wanted to talk about. And unbelievably, it's never happened as far as I know. And so I wanted to see if we could do that, and somehow and possibly here we are. The other thing is that, and just to go back to kids and young people again for a moment, the most Native writers I know have developed in isolation. They have not had other Native writers to talk to about the difficulties that they're dealing with in terms of like how their work. It's very hard to figure out how to write when you know that most of your audience, your reading audience, has no idea what you're talking about, doesn't know anything about the world you come from, and is actually not only doesn't know but has an expectation that you're there to explain to them everything, to be their tour guide. And that's not an easy set of problems to work through on your own, and yet most of us have. But there's no reason for it to continue that way. And so the idea is that the younger Native people, I'm hoping, will begin to come to these festivals and will watch the videos that have been recorded of these talks and these panels, and on the James Welch Festival YouTube channel, and that will allow them to, that will hopefully accelerate their development through these problems so that they don't have to, spend 10 to 15 years figuring out how the fuck to do this, because there are people who have done it before them. And in the past, it was just because it was impossible to come into contact with those writers. And we're trying to, one of the things we want to do here is remedy that. Last thing is, everybody's like, why are you holding it at the end of July? It's the worst time to hold this thing. And one of the, whether or not it continues this way, the reason that I wanted to hold it at the end of July, and I'm really hesitant to talk about this because it really makes me sound like I'm, a super Indian or something. But the main summer Blackfoot ceremony is the Ukan, and it usually happens right around this time, end of July, early August, and that is because right about now is when the choke cherries start to get ripe, and I wanted to hold this around that same time. In the summers, we used to be split up into bands, right? And in the summers, that was really the only time that all of the Blackfoot bands got together, and that was when everybody got married, because when you were living in a band, you were mostly related to people. So anyway, that's some of what's behind this. I want to bring Arlene Adams up here now, and she's going to sing. She's going to do our closing prayer, and then sing if she wants to, and then I'll say a couple more things, and we're going to honor the writers that are here tonight, and then we'll move on to the main event.
Let's give it up for Sterling. Sakapi, Sterling. It's been an honor and privilege and a pleasure to be amongst and to listen to the short writings I've been able to. Today I wear my skirt with writing Earth Boy 40, a great awareness of a moment in time, of a place in nature, and of the human content being in that context. Lois Welch, Lemlemch, Usukit Kukani for putting up with Jim Welch, Louise Aldrich, Tommy Orange, and all of you writers, Lemlemch, Usukit Kukani for helping those of us that have a hard time with that writing express ourselves. Keep writing, please. Students, Upward Bound, IAIA, Lemlemch, Husukit Kokini for coming here, for being a part of what you follow in your heart and in your own human being, context of your life. Thank you for that. And so I ask the other night that we all stand east in the prayer song that I sing. And I want you to know that the way I was told and the way I was raised here on this land, that we do that for ourselves and we ask for ourselves as the sun comes up from the east and takes care of us throughout the day. So I would ask that you join me in that at this moment. And to continue that prayer, Kulan Sutan, Atsmit Kapapa Wasiyal, for whatever it is that we need individually in this room, outside of this room, and in our individual path and roads. Lamlam Shusukil Kukni, from the Salish people of this land to you.
Here I am again. I forgot to say one thing, if you can believe it. And I just want to talk about these Upward Bound kids again for a second here. You know, one of the things that we want to do is, well, thank you, Arlene. Sorry for not saying that immediately. It's very important to me to have a Salish person here to say a prayer and sing. That's where we are, whether, you know, that's just a fact. Where we want to go in the future of this festival is that I want to, we want to expand slowly outward. You know, obviously this is relatively fiction-centric. We have a poetry panel because I knew otherwise I would never hear the end of it. The next one in 2024 will be, all the main speakers will be poets. I'm serious. No, that's not a joke. but you can laugh all you want. I don't care. But we will eventually, over time, expand it to TV and film, visual art, and honestly, like I would love to have theater going to. And eventually, down the road, what we want to do is we want to run workshops for middle schoolers and high schoolers in the week or two leading up to the festival. Obviously, you know, the main idea for this is that we get Native kids to be able to come in and go to these workshops, right? And to be taught by Native teachers. But also, like, those workshops will ultimately be open to anybody because that's what feels right to me. I think that it's, I mean, I don't even know how to say this. We're just now reaching a point where Indian kids can actually look out into the world around them and see Indians who are doing things that they might want to do. That was almost impossible even 30 years ago. There were just so few. and even then, like, the ones that were out there, it's just, you know, the internet makes it so much easier for us to access each other now. And I really want this space to ultimately be one where younger Native people can come and practice these things in workshop and then go to the festival at the end of all of it and see Native artists who are doing the things that they may want to do. And so they can start to make that through line in their minds from where they are now to where, and this is how you get there. And that's why I really wanted these writers to be able to speak about their lives and their processes and just their thoughts about art and so on and so forth in a way that felt right to them, because that's the easiest way for younger Native kids to identify with them, to put it simply. So that's really important to me. I mean, in the end, I know it sounds like I'm like running a Blackfoot conversion festival, but and you can't really replicate it. But in the old days, you know, our big summer camps were set up in concentric circles, and the people who were at the center of the camp were the elderly and the young, and then the warriors were on the outside, and so on and so forth. And that's really that's like the it's more complicated than that, but that's generally like the Blackfoot idea of, like, this is how we take care of each other, and this is how we live with each other, and this is how we connect our young to the old, and this is how we raise kids to become, the people who then take care of the people younger than them. And I want this festival in some way or another to reflect that. So what I want to do now is I want to have the writers come up here. The main are Louise, Kelli, Joe, Tommy, and Brandon come up here, and we're going to do something for you. So get up here. And TJ, where are you at? Man, I really feel like I'm at the end of a powwow here. Everybody's tired. Half the people went home because they lost. And now it's just us. So we're going to honor these writers in this way. But one note here, this is a star quilt that was Jim's, and we're going to be giving this to Louise also.
Oki nixoquex, nistuni daniku, ishisuku mapa puma, ke nakisuku kanaki, espumo kit nan, James Welch Native Lit Festival, espumo kit, espumos Sterling Holy White Mount, and espumo kit nan are prestigious writers. Thank you. This song, Sterling asked me to sing a song for our writers, and these writers have shared their space with us through their writings. And in that process, we are connected metaphysically. And in a Blackfeet culture, when we honor people, we acknowledge them with a song. And I'm very grateful to be asked to do this on behalf of my brother Sterling and to these writers that create space for so many people throughout the world. And for their words to connect to us is a meaningful lesson that we are all connected as one another. And as my brother said, that this is a space that is being created, and you guys are a part of that space. So to honor you in this way, we sing this song.
You can go. Oh, no, you can go. I'm not going to hold you prisoner anymore. Thank you. I really thank all of you for coming here and giving what you gave. Last thing before we start the main, we're actually on time if you can believe it. I can't believe it. But it's mostly because TJ didn't talk as long as I thought he was going to talk. Last thing I want to say here, in Blackfoot, we have these, Nutakinan is my spirit, but Kutakinan is ours. It's something that only exists when we're together. And so I want to thank not just all the writers for being here, but all of you for being here, because there is no festival without you being here. And so, I'm pleased with what all of you have done. So we're gonna move some furniture out here, and then we'll let Chris Latrace start. Last thing. The name of this event, which was not advertised well, is the We Talk, You Listen event, which, as I said before, is a famous phrase that comes from Vine Deloria, the original great Indian academic. He was Lakota, and the idea was that is that it's very hard for Indians to speak and actually be heard, and so in this country. And so I thought, well, let's just make a space where we talk and you listen. So that's what this is, and we'll get that started here in a minute. Really, one last thing. We're gonna run the Q&A the same way we have before. The volunteers are gonna hand out cards. If you have any questions for the writers, you're going to write your questions on the cards. You're going to take them back to the info table, or they will come and collect them. And then I'll be down there at that mic, and the cards are going to go to me, and then I'll ask the questions. So once again, we avoid the inevitable question of what is it like to live in a teepee. I know one of you wants to ask that.
Well, bonjour, friends. Thanks for coming again. Thank you for Sterling for stopping talking. The we talk, you listen is actually we talk about Sterling and you listen. Because I'm really, you know what, let's start that. And then we'll read. First, I want to know how each of you met Sterling. I heard you guys talking about a horror anthology behind me earlier, so that I feel like this is like a good way to talk about horror.
Well, I just live in California, and his mouth, how loud. As soon as he got into the Wallace Stegner, I could hear him talking about getting into the program. So that's how it was sort of a oral bat signal that he had come to California and got into the prestigious Stanford writing program.
I met him via a Robert Redford GIF.
Did you know it was Robert Redford? Because that's a thing that's been going around, is that all these people didn't know that was Robert Redford.
I did, but I thought also that he looked like Sterling, so when I got here, I was confused.
Do you guys know the meme we're talking about? It's the zoom in from the Jeremiah Johnson movie where he's doing the slow dude nod.
It looks like Zach Galifianakis.
Brandon?
I met Sterling officially, I guess, on Zoom and IAIA reading, but he follows me on Instagram and sends me private messages a lot, so I don't really respond to them.
Sure. So the next thing we're going to do is each of these wonderful writers is going to read from some new work, I'm told, like for 5 minutes or whatever work you choose you want to read from. Did you guys know? Because I didn't know about this part. If it wasn't for Tommy 10 minutes ago, I wouldn't know about this part. So are we good to do that? Okay. Kelly Jo, you want to go first?
Oh my.
Do you want to stand for the mic?
It might be easier
Okay.
to stand if that's okay.
I mean, these being Indians, I had my wallet as far away as I could, so I don't have to move it again.
Thank you. All right, I've never read from my iPad before, so it might go to sleep on me, and then I'll just talk to you. Thank you all so much thank you to Sterling for inviting me, and thank you to you all here, writers and readers, for joining us and welcoming us so warmly. It's a real honor to be here with everyone on the stage right now and everyone who came before. I'm going to read a bit from something that's really newer than brand new, and usually I'm much too precious about something I'm working on to do that. I won't let it out of the house until I'm sure I've done everything that I can to it. But I'm not going to do that tonight. I'm going to read something that's really new, and I figure at the very least maybe it could inspire some of you to be like, I could do that. So this is the opening page and a half or so, maybe 2 pages, of a new novel thing I'm working on. It's about 3 generations of Cherokee women, which probably sounds familiar if you've read anything I've ever written. But these women have a run-in with a Christian identity movement compound that's located in the Cherokee Nation. Think like, if you're not familiar with that sect, think right-wing militia types, but extra white supremacy and Bibles. And this idea comes from a Christian identity compound that is in the Cherokee Nation, which baffles me. And so it's something I want to understand. I don't think there's really any understanding it, but I'm drawn to this idea that they're right there. So these pages, we're starting out with the youngest protagonist. For now, her name is JJ Rabbit. She's about to drop out of college and go home to be with her mother and grandmother back in the Cherokee Nation. And that's going to set off the larger plot for the book when they have a run-in with these folks. And the story starts 1 year before the Oklahoma City bombing and follows the family, these 3 women, essentially over the next year. When you're a first-generation college student and even kind of brown, people assume one of 2 things about you: that you're exceptional. And by exceptional, they mean that you'll kill the curve, miss all the parties, and basically destroy yourself to make your parents, your tribe, your country proud. Those are the more enlightened people. The other ones assume your affirmative action case, that you didn't need to get the grades or the scores, and that you're there for free to boost the university's numbers. They don't say you're taking someone else's spot, someone more deserving, more white, wealthier. They don't have to. Me, I was somewhere in the middle. Once I got accepted into UVA, a state school with Ivy League ambitions and $17,000 out-of-state tuition on the other side of the country, I set about celebrating my good fortune of not being a teenage mom. I was ahead of the game as far as I was concerned, and honestly, as far as pretty much everyone else was concerned too. I finished trig in chemistry and hung up my math and science hats for good. I rested on my smart kind of brown kid laurels, coasting through my last semester in high school, going home at lunch to watch Days of Our Lives, and not going back to school until basketball practice at the end of my day. I'd punched my ticket the hell out of Stillwell, Oklahoma, and my only plan was to stay gone. The thing is money. It's always money. We signed on all the dotted lines, signed every loan they put before us, and it worked. Except back to that first thing. I wasn't exceptional, but try telling that to my mom. April 19th, 1994. I dropped my backpack beside my desk and let the heavy dorm room door slam behind me. I was exhausted, but if I could stay awake another hour and a half, I could probably study enough to do fine on my astronomy final, the biggest gut at UVA, they called it, the class filled with Division I athletes, the class that I was going to fail if I didn't get my shit together and pass the final, finally learn the constellations, and make it to the Sky Lab to take the star quiz, something I'd had all spring semester to do. Just as I was about to sit down at the desk, I noticed the message machine blinking on the wooden spool table on the far side of the tiny room. For a minute, I wondered if it was old Mr. White Guy calling to tell me happy birthday. I'd given him my number the last time my mostly former roommate Charlotte had drugged me out to one of her parties. I closed my giant astronomy textbook and went to the machine. I met him the night of my last Charlotte hurrah, before she made actual friends and didn't need me tagging along to her functions. She was finding her way. I was only sure that my way wasn't with her crowd. That was already obvious as I sat there that night with my oversized 2 a.m. slice of cheese pizza, while Charlotte yucked it up with a bunch of people who looked just like all the other people we'd left behind at the party. There hadn't been room for me at Charlotte's table. Just make these people move and pull your table over, she said. I went on with my cheese eating. I rolled my eyes. The only chair left was at my table, an old Mr. White Guy, that is, at least as old as my mom White Guy, but with a nice ponytail, a Dave Matthews t-shirt, and Vans. Walked up with 2 slices of broccoli pizza and asked to sit. He made the right jokes about the frat crowd that was elbowing us in the head and spilling drinks. He leaned in and said, "So, Oklahoma? I gotta ask, are you an American Indian?" Before he told me about how singing and drumming at a powwow once had made him cry. Before he left, I gave him my number. I don't know, maybe because Charlotte and her friends were making faces and all aghast. But whoever was on the answer machine, I was happy to not think about astronomy for a minute. Of course it wasn't him calling to tell me happy birthday. How could he have known? When I pushed the button on the machine, my mom's voice sounded strained through the crackle of the tape. "The call is coming from Oklahoma, Mr. Marley," I said, since Charlotte had basically moved in with her boyfriend, who she had described as from a very mid-fraternity, but at least he was the president. I'd taken to talking to my Bob Marley legend poster. It was embarrassing, but only I knew it, me and Mr. Marley. "Janie June," my mom started. "I was calling to tell you, oh, hi Charlotte, this is Janie's mom. I hope everything's fine with school. This message is for Janie." First, Janie June was not my name at school. Second, obviously, Mom, the message could only be for me. Finally, for the past year, I'd been trying to subtly lose the accent I heard coming through the machine. I grabbed my chest and did my best Fred Sanford and fell over on my twin bed. "I hope everything's going good out there." Long, flat I, ass for ice, not the hard, sharp I I'd been working on, an agreeable pirate. "And I hope your day is all sunshine and rainbows, my little popcorn fart." I smashed my pillow over my face and groaned, Fanny, which is what I called my mom when she annoyed me. I was glad nobody was in here to hear this. Mom paused as if she forgot she was talking to the machine, as if she thought I was going to answer her, which I guess I had. "I'm sorry you're going to miss the Strawberry Festival. I wish we could have brought you home for spring break." She paused again, so I answered, "It's okay, Fanny, really, it's okay. Maybe next year, baby, but I was wondering if you thought more about getting a job." Oh, Mr. Marley. I was sucking my teeth at the poster, and then without letting myself in on the decision, it was decided. Fuck general relativity and the death of stars and the wider galaxy that you could never really know anyway. I moved an aloe plant off the upturned 5-gallon bucket and pulled out my little half-cash glass bong. I pushed around what was left in the bowl with my lighter, and then I put a fresh dryer sheet in a paper towel roll and walked to the window, while Fanny continued to forget my birth. I can't believe I'm reading this right now. As she went on, "If you have time to work another job on top of the work-study thing you're doing in the cafeteria, I know it's a lot, baby. I'm sorry." Fanny was trying not to cry. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelli. Also, thank you for setting the precedent to read from an electronic thing. So if anyone hasn't read there's kind of like an intense spoiler based on me reading this. But it's like the best kind of spoiler. It almost makes it like a freshener. It's like the opposite of spoiler, because like the ending of the book is super sad, and the spoiling part will make this like not as sad. Orville is at home for the first time in weeks, and it is Saturday and he is sleeping. Opal and Jackie announced they were going out for a walk around Lake Merritt a little earlier, while Luther was texting with his new friend Veronica, and he waved his arm but didn't look to see if they saw him hear them. Luther is not sitting here hoping she will become his girlfriend or whatever, because he doesn't even know what that means. It's like an old-fashioned thing. He does know that he likes her, and she knows now too, because he texted her that he does, saying, "I like you," with no capitalization or period to seem more casual. She hasn't responded, and in place of a response, blink the simulated thinking dots menacingly. The longer nothing shows, the more it seems she's deciding not to, but the dots are better than nothing. Or would he be more patient without the dots? He is wondering. So then he is also wondering if there is a way to turn the dots off. And he goes to look it up, but gets a text from her saying they should meet up for coffee, and Luther goes almost right away, walks out the front door, not even noticing Lonnie in the bushes on his way out. Lonnie sits in the rose bushes out in front of their house. A thorn snags his shoulder, pulls his shirt like the thing wants him back in the bushes with it as he tries to leave. He is annoyed, as anyone ever is, getting snagged like that. A thought comes to him quick as the snag, that he wouldn't even be in the stupid bushes if he wasn't so afraid of being out in public, out there on the street where just about anything could happen to him, is the way it feels. If only they could have their old life back before what happened at the powwow is the thought he doesn't want to have thought, which is why it felt like a snag when it came to him. He pulls up his shirt sleeve, pinches where the thorn dug in deepest, because it first dug, then slid across his arm, and watches the blood come. He remembers then when Orville had pulled spider legs out of his own leg in a West Oakland Target bathroom after Orville told their story for money to a filmmaker, and they'd gotten Lonnie a brand new bike. When Orville had asked Opal what she thought it meant on a voicemail message, nothing had ever come of it. So Lonnie had asked Opal what she thought about the spider legs in Orville's leg while Orville was in the hospital, and she told him she'd pulled spider legs out of her own leg when she was his age, and that it had come just after the blood first came with her first moon, and around the same time when Jackie's moon stopped coming, and that she always feared the spider legs meant something worse than they did, but in the end didn't seem to mean anything more than that it ran in the family. Like blood, Lonnie had said to her then. Lonnie's blood was the only one that matched Orville's when he needed it in the hospital. Lonnie hated the sight of needles and their sneaky little needle pain, but he liked that he could give his blood to Orville to help when he needed it, so he did. When Orville Redfeather first woke up in the hospital, his brothers were sitting at the foot of his bed playing war with a beat-up deck of cards the nurse had given them. Their grandma Jackie watched Luther and Lonnie play, sneaking looks at Orville every now and then. Orville snuck looks too, and through a squint he watched a pigeon with one foot land on a sill outside the window and felt bad for its plight. Then remembered it could fly, and that feet don't matter so much when you can fly. Feet are more like a butt when you can fly. A slow tear ran down his cheek then. It would have been enough to feel the tear, its falling speed, its warmth, and to see his brothers there, to know Jackie, their real grandma, who'd never really been in their lives, to make him want to cry, but the tear was just one of those waking up tears, like the wet on the grass in the morning isn't from rain. Lonnie was the first to notice Orville was awake, and when he did, he came over to hug Orville as best he could over the metal barred bed rail. Orville went to speak, but then coughed and cleared his throat, then asked about where Opal was. Lonnie said she was getting them food about where Opal was, while Luther gathered up the playing cards at the end of the bed and put them back in the box. War, Luther said about the cards. The word war sounded or resounded in Orville's head like a metal box with little metal things inside it, going down a stairwell made of metal walls that seemed would never stop winding down the lining inside Orville's head. Hospital cafeteria tacos, Lonnie said with his tongue out. Hope you're hungry, Luther said with a crooked Luther smile. Orville didn't ever want to eat again. He was that kind of not hungry. Jackie seemed like she was about to say something, then she covered one of her eyes with a fist, stood up and walked out into the hallway. Orville said to his brothers, "So you guys just been playing cards while I was over here dying, or what?" They smiled wide and lost it for a second, abandoned themselves to laughing like nothing bad had ever happened to anyone. Laughing could bring that to the room. But then it hurt Orville's stomach to laugh, and he winced and sucked in air through his teeth. So they stopped laughing and watched the door to see if Jackie would come back in. Orville asked his brothers what Jackie was doing out there once it seemed like she wasn't coming back in. Luther said he didn't know, and Lonnie said, "Yeah, we do." So Orville asked Luther what Lonnie was talking about. Lonnie said Jackie had carried Orville off the field after he got shot. "One of your shoes fell off," Lonnie said. "What are you talking about?" Orville asked. Luther and Lonnie didn't know how to answer that, so silence hung there between them for a minute or so like distant church bells before Luther couldn't help but telling Orville again that Jackie had carried him, that he lost a shoe, motioning with his arms how she'd carried Orville out to the car to take him to the hospital. Lonnie put his arms up the same way as Luther's, indicating he saw her carry him out to the parking lot of the Coliseum too. They were telling Orville not to ask again why Jackie was there with her arms up in the air in that carrying motion. Orville felt shame about almost dying then, thought that it made him weak, which made him feel mad about the shame, but then too weak to hold the feeling. Lonnie stretched and farted pretty loud, which didn't seem on purpose. No one laughed because it didn't seem meant to be funny. He just stretched and accidentally let one out. It actually seemed sad. There was a long pause before Lonnie said, "Do you know they go 10 feet per second?" "What?" Luther said. "No, they don't. You're hella stupid," Luther said. "No, they don't." "That's almost 7 miles per hour, Lonnie said. "You can't run that fast." And looked at them both without even smiling. "That did smell pretty fast," Luther said. And Lonnie laughed, that hard but quiet Lonnie laugh with little clicks that came from the back of his throat that made them all laugh all the harder. Orville laughed out the word stupid, then felt that sharp ache in his gut again, only this time he didn't wince. Just stayed laughing so as to not ruin the moment.
Thanks, Tommy. That's amazing. And thanks, Sterling. Thanks, everyone, for being here. I know people who wouldn't walk down the hallway to listen to anything that I have to say. So the fact that people are here makes me feel good. So I'm going to read something new also, and this is about juvenile incarceration. All 4 drill sergeants wore Army green service uniforms and campaign hats with a forward tilt. They told us they would break us down and build us up again. They told us if they had it their way, they would have cut all our umbilical cords with a rusty knife and toasted our future failures over whiskey right there in the delivery room. Or was it, they asked, that we were born in the back of pickup trucks on dirt roads not too far from our trailer homes, or beside the amber tributaries flowing with piss and garbage our families were too lazy to dispense into trash cans? Were we born on kitchen floors, uncarpeted bedroom floors, or outside on blankets laying over dirt and rock? Did angular, half-drunk buzzards drop us on our doorsteps? Or were our mothers taken to a real hospital that cost taxpayers extra to pay the doctors so that we could be born into this world only to take it for granted? Were we all, they continued, offspring of the 60s hippie generation with our hair and disjointed bones caused by a lack of proper nutrition and exercise and medical care? Were we distressed from lack of discipline and dental care? Poor us, offspring of whorehouse workers who ate locusts and withered fruit, whose bad judgment was never questioned, whose early childhood consisted of urinating in our pants due to disillusionment from poor parenting and a fear of authority? Or was it, they asked, that we were incapable of learning personal courage and conviction, betrayed by our own ignorance and lust for pleasure? This is the end of the 80s as we know it, they said. Things are tough as we edge toward the 90s. How do you people cope without being disciplined? They spoke with a lisp, disciplined. Look at us in the eyes, all of you, as we stand here before your sorry selves and ask, how do you stand there and wonder all pug-eyed and foolish like hippies? The answer is simple. You'll need to learn strict discipline. To succeed in your life, you poor, spoiled, selfish runts without discipline. They removed their aviator sunglasses and looked at us with bloodshot eyes from severe hangovers. We were in pain and capable of dragging any truth out of ourselves, they told us. Embittered and selfish, felonious, lacking a soldier's obedience under the fierce vigilance of an authoritarian, without a clue or care, and living in a bleeding-hearted world, losing its capitalist values, our voices never to be heard on the street despite our affiliation to community or culture. That's what they said. We were destined for a life of shoveling cow shit or carrying severed chicken heads in sacks, too focused on the sad glow of the TV screens and VCR movies with fuzzy tracking, too distracted by the satanic lure of Iron Maiden and arcade games in malls, too amused by fantasy and the devil's music that Jim and Tammy Faye Baker were weeping about in terms of its rotten influence on youth today. Prisoners on our own devilish dungeons that would ultimately leave us with no military protection, fucked. Never in a million years would we survive the adversity of a dying nation unless we get Reaganomics back, and we understood the whole nation was suffering from a threat of implementing socialist values and a rash of convulsions of protest to the good old campaign that we all needed to adhere to, just say no, because we weren't paying attention to the crack cocaine epidemic that was rising, too ignorant to the war on drugs that Nixon had begun in the 70s, too cool to attend the drug abuse resistance education program, DARE, which was blasphemy. So numb and dumb we were that we'd probably end up drinking carbolic acid at our hippie parties without realizing how lethal it was. Blasphemy and lack of discipline, they said. We were ordered to do calisthenics, push-ups, squats, and sit-ups along with the stretches. We were ordered to look at them directly in the eye. No eye contact meant weakness and failure, but looking at them in the eye for too long was detestable too, they said, and weird. Don't stare. A strong, virile man knows just how to look, how long to give eye contact without the fear of conveying weirdness. We were ordered to line up and then spread out for exercise. We were ordered to do our best, give everything we had, no matter how little sleep we'd had or how full our bellies were with breakfast. We were ordered to refrain from obtuse breathing or coughing or hacking up phlegm. No whining or crying, no looking around at others. Good soreness was a blessing, they told us. To be so sore we wouldn't be able to lift our forks to our mouths at the dinner table. And sure enough, their manner became more intense with each exercise as we struggled, believe it or not. All the drill sergeants laughed and said they'd seen more action in armpit polyps. Better get in shape, you poltroons, they said. Better do a thorough examination of your thin bodies and muscles before the older hippies brainwash you into thinking it's all about the mind and spirit. Whenever we tried to ask questions or respond, they cupped their ears dramatically, as if they couldn't believe we had the nerve to say anything at all. We might as well scream into the pillow. That's what they told us, their faces twisted in a stupor, taking turns walking behind the Columbus building to smoke a cigarette, while in hypocrisy calling over to the detention staff who are also smoking on their break to get back to work and stop wasting their tax dollars. Slowly, we felt ourselves on the edge of misery and death anytime we were around the drill sergeants, clinging to any kind of hope that they would let up and stop making us do push-ups or duck walks across the yard. By the end of the hour, we were so exhausted that it seemed better to be dead than subjected to the rigorous humiliation, the soreness and pain, soaked in sweat and moaning with the unbearable despair, just in time to hear Sergeant Hood's deep and intentional long belch, followed by an announcement that the next months would be the most difficult of our lives because none of us, especially the Indians, were going anywhere.
Thank you, guys. It's, as Kelly Jo said, it's not easy to read like unedited and finished and all of that stuff, so thank you for going out on the limb for us. One thing that I have long had a beef with, and I'm going to preface this by saying I don't see this in any of your work, when it comes to literary fiction, is just the bludgeoning of trauma that we often have to endure to get from cover to cover. And one of the failings that I see is the lack of humor. And you all bring humor into your work. And because, the point I make when I make this argument to people is that no matter how bad things are, there are things to laugh about. So like in Tommy's reading here, in the aftermath of this horrific spoiler event, you have these kids sitting around talking about how fast farts will move across the room. And I want to know, I'll start with you, Kelly, is, the humor that arrives in your work, is that something conscious? Because the argument I make when I tell people is that, my Indian friends live and are in families, either within their own family or a degree removed with all of these horrific things. Yet the funniest people I know in my life are all Indians. And I'm just curious if you consciously recognize that there is humor, or does it just happen?
I think for that particular book and those characters, I felt like I had worked with those characters for so long. It took me many years to bring Crooked Hallelujah together in a book. And to me, they felt like people who talked like people I knew. And so I felt like I was kind of like connected to their voices that felt like the voices of people I come from and who are, you know, in my family, I'm more quiet. I want to sit and listen and get them talking because they're such good storytellers and they're so funny. I have an uncle who married into the family who says my mom and her 3 sisters are, that they think that they're the funniest son of a bitches in the world. And we do, and we are, you know, and so I think that it's just for that particular, maybe it's like story by story, but there are just characters that I'm able to sort of key into their voice, and it feels like kind of, it feels like people I know in that book.
Sure. Brandon, do you have a thought?
Well, that's a really interesting question because I feel like I've always tried to be sad, and yet people laugh, right? like I mean, there's a fine line between sadness and humor, and it's a very strange line. And I've done readings where I've read what I thought was extremely sad work, and people were laughing. And my book about a foster child who was severely abused, I like to write about abuse. I like to write about young people. You know, and so it's really. I mean, it doesn't hurt my feelings or anything. It's not like I'm, you know, damn, you know. But I mean, I'm not sure I understand. There's an anxiety behind like what we're supposed to laugh about, I think. And you know what's sad and what's funny. In Tommy's reading, you mentioned that, you know, it's sad, right? I mean, but it's funny. So I don't know. It's a very interesting question. I'm not sure I don't purposely try to be. I'm not purposely trying to be funny, and I don't know that I am that. My wife would say I'm not funny at all, right? You know, so it's okay. You know, and my kids, but so yeah, I don't know. Tommy?
Well, I mean, I relate to what you're saying. I was here a couple years ago doing a story for Tell Us Something, and I tried to make a serious point about, you know, the trope that only Indians, dogs, and horses need to have papers. And a couple people laugh. I'm like, that wasn't supposed to be fucking funny. But yeah, so I get your point. Tommy?
I think laughter is such an instinctual way that humans go to release energy. I was just talking to my older sister recently, and there's like a lot going down with my family right now. It's like, check in with me week by week. That's the same thing I'll say, but like, there's something intense that happened this week, and you know, like my niece, her daughter is about to lose her kids, and she's talking to me in a tone that's like, this is really funny, and it is. Like, the lies that she's telling everyone, including us, and the way that she's lying is actually funny. And the way that we're talking, we're laughing together. And, you know, this is a very dark tone that I'm drawing right now with this story, this particular family story. But the way that we go to make each other laugh, no matter the context, is seeking a kind of transcendence and a kind of relief and a kind of release. And like in the work, I don't know, like Brandon just said, to try to write funny in literary context, in writing in general, is like tough. It's very tough. There's very few books that are like, that is a funny book. There's not very many books that are making people laugh. But the way people who are traumatized and have to find the ridiculousness and absurdity of how intense the pain is, while also normalizing, I'm alive, and we're okay, and we love each other. And it's kind of funny that we can still be like relating to each other, and we kind of have to make it funny. There's an Indian humor that I have found in my family and in my personal life with my family that, and you know, my dad happened to love fart jokes, and like the word in Cheyenne for fart, bunnists, was one of the first words I knew in Cheyenne. Like, this is just like an Indian thing. And it's in other cultures too, but like the idea that you can make an absurd sound that can burst forth from you and you don't even know what it means, but you're making this ridiculous sound and it's releasing energy, and some people need that more than others.
Profound. I just feel justified for being able to laugh at a fart joke at any moment, at any time, at any age. So one of my favorite tropes is, white people tropes, is encountering, and this isn't a thing that happens infrequently. You know, as you go out and do readings and you're among people, and I'll be told, I really practice a Native American spirituality. Or they'll say, I play the Native American flute, or insert anything. And my favorite answer is typically, well, which one? Like Native American spirituality. I'll say, which one? And you see this face. Well, the Native American one. And it's like, well, there's 758. There's these monolithic ideas that people have. Number one, that we all practice with, like, this is Turtle Island to everyone, and it's not. Different tribes, different cultures view their own creation stories differently. And then the flip side of that, and Kelli, this is big in your book, is I don't know how many people really realize, despite everything that's happened, how deeply the claws of Christianity are in all of our native tribes. So like my tribe is very Catholic. And even though our tribal meetings and things begin with a prayer and there's usually an honor song, like that's the only native moment, traditional, whatever you want to call it, in most of these people's lives. And too often when one of our cultural people is up saying the prayer or whatever, it sounds to me like someone is talking in a way they think an Indian is supposed to sound like. And I think that is lost on a lot of people, that they assume we all have this Native American spirituality. And can you talk about, your book begins in this very, fundamental Christian faith that presumably is a big part of your cultural experience. And do you run into those types of conflicts where people expect you to be this thing and the reality is your people is this other thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, getting the chance to talk to people about the book. So many readers, it seems, don't find it, maybe like it doesn't seem Indian enough to them. They thought, like, this isn't really what I was signing on for. This is a book in great part about mothers and daughters and religion and faith. So I think that it's just I get those questions a lot. Where is the native culture here? and it's almost all of the Indians and Cherokee people I know back home are Christians. Not necessarily in that kind of a fundamentalist church, but, it is the Bible Belt there in the Cherokee Nation. So, I don't know, it's hard. It's something that I think I still work through and try to understand myself, because a lot like the main character, the youngest protagonist in the book, my journey was similar to hers in that we left the Cherokee Nation when I was maybe 8 or 9. My mom and I did. And so, my experience with being home in Indian country is being often, in a holiness church. And, I remember being a little girl and sleeping underneath a pew, and my great-grandmother maybe like handing me down a stick of gum, and her first language was Cherokee, and, it's like, no, you're not going to say that my Granny Connolly is not Native because she's also a Christian, That's a part of our story, and it's a part of so many of our stories. Yeah.
Christianity in general.
Yes. Because we're probably going to talk about the fucking Pope, too, being in Canada.
So my parents met at a Perry commune in northern New Mexico. Skip forward 3 years. My mom got saved by Jesus in front of a TV during the height of televangelist age. I don't know, maybe it's at its height now. I can't follow it anymore. So I grew up evangelical. I just found out when my mom was in labor with me, she came into the hospital in Oakland, at Merritt Hospital in Oakland, speaking tongues. I just found that out. She visited 2 weeks ago. So this is my intense Christianity experience. My mom was like doing this crazy thing. And so I grew up thinking the end of the world was coming before I would be an adult. And I did not believe in Jesus at all. I asked him to come into my heart at night. I was like, Jesus, come into my heart. Just complete silence. I was constantly asking him at night. Nothing.
Did you try it in tongues?
I went in front of the church, and they came by and tapped your forehead. And my mom saw this, and this was actually one of her, because she's now back in Native American church, still praying to Jesus. So this is why it's so complicated. They came by forcefully tapping your forehead, like, you should go back regardless of if you're slain in the spirit. And the guy came to my head, and he tapped my head back, and I went back, and I came forward, and I was like, mm-mm. And it just never happened. And my dad, broke his neck when he was 21, fell off a bridge with no water in it, and Jesus appeared before him, and he was saved by Jesus. My dad is one of the last living fluent language speakers from our tribe. He grew up going to Native American church and Baptist church and sweat ceremony. Like, it was all the same thing. Like, there's a certain Indian way of thinking that, like, Jesus was an Indian, or like it could be understood that way.
Well, he had long hair, allegedly.
Well, and suffering on the cross, like we understand suffering. So like, it's a very complicated relationship for me because everyone in my family still prays to Jesus. And Crooked Hallelujah is such a beautiful title for a book. And I don't want to tell anybody that that what they believe is not like, they're not connecting to transcendence of some kind. It's not anything that I've ever connected with. It's a complicated issue that has never been able to not be complicated for me, because I grew up thinking the world was going to end before I became an adult. And in a lot of ways, influenced me becoming a writer. Like, I saw my dad in stage 4 cancer in a teepee in a Native American church ceremony get healed. He did not have cancer anymore after an NAC meeting. And I have to somehow fit that in within my, what I believe. He was praying to Jesus that night. So it's super complicated. Sorry I went on so long on that subject.
That's great. Thank you. Brandon, do you have anything you want to share about this? Or?
Well, just that my sister Kelli here is from Oklahoma. I'm Cherokee Nation with her too. Just, I don't like talking about my life too much, but I do have relatives who are very fundamentalist Christian, and I think about it a lot. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay. Well, I mean, part of it is there's this expectation that we're supposedly this deeply spiritual people, and then as writers, you are representatives of this deeply spiritual alleged people. And I just wonder if you're ever faced with like people who are like disappointed to realize that you don't, smudge before every reading and whatever this is, and the misunderstanding, even, not in all cases, but like, a lot of times, Native people, it wasn't so much a conversion situation as it was, we want all the spiritual power from the universe we can get, and here's this Jesus guy who can allegedly help us with that, and we'll take some of that too. It wasn't an either or, it was both. It was everything, and it was just through this time passing and just the weight of all of these people taking what was ours that kind of pushed it to this really fundamental version of what we had to begin with, I guess.
I just recently found out that the Cheyenne prophet, Sweet Medicine, his story is a virgin birth story.
Yeah.
So if you can imagine these people this is the God you need to worship, and they're like, oh, that's the same story as our prophet who actually predicted who predicted white people coming before they came, who talked about webs around the world and giant shiny birds, crazy stuff that happened and he said before they happened. You can imagine that you would think, okay, this is part of some holy thing.
Right. Yeah, and Anishinaabe culture is the same, very similar. These prophets, thousands of years ago, the 7 fires talk about these people coming. So there's all of these interrelated things. But I want to talk about the Pope, unless you have something you want to say.
Yeah, I just want to say, so often I feel like things are reduced to sort of it's black or white. And, and in my book, I wrote about one particular family from one particular fundamentalist church that, practices their practices really isolated them from all the cultures around them. But, so many, it's different and more complex for so many other. Didn't you tell me that your grandparents were Christians but still went to ceremony and, and that's the case for so many people. And I think that's hard to understand if you're not reading books by a lot of Native writers and you encounter one and this is what you see and you're like, oh, that's what it's like,
right.
And so that's always my push for we need more of you out here writing, and then the more books that we're able to get out there, the less there's a push to sort of put your book in a box and make it be a certain kind of book, you know?
Getting, like, I want to talk about the freaking Pope.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Because that's one of those things that there's not enough Native people, unless you're on Twitter or something, talking about the Pope coming to Canada. And first, what happened in Canada happened in the United States too. The Canadians are just way out in front of us as far as acknowledging that. And even they have a lot to do, have a long way to go. And the Pope comes here and does this apology, and white North America says, "Oh, isn't it great the Pope apologized?" It's like, well, what does that even mean? And people say, well, it's a start. And I would say that when you are like the biggest landowner in the world and just wealthier than the God you worship, the bar is a little higher for your starting point than just a guy flying over, going on a tour and saying a few words and forgetting about it. So, there's a Métis artist who, Christy Belcourt, I saw a post about, how about the Catholic Church fund immersion language schools in North America for like 50 years. Fund all of them. Yeah, forever, why not? Do you guys have, I'm just a moderator, but I could talk and talk, but I want to know what you guys think. What would a pope, what could they do that would be meaningful? Or is this something that you think about?
How much land do they have over here?
Well, they have, exactly.
Right.
Well, I think you should answer, but I think the doctrine of discovery is still being used by oil companies to do really evil shit. So like that's something that they could try to negate or at least speak out against, because that's like a very Catholic thing.
But yeah, I mean, that's my question, is land, you could start there as well.
Yeah, land back, right? Yeah. Brandon, do you have a thought on this? You just don't want to talk about the spiritual world, do you? See, that's an Indian thing.
In the words of N. Scott Momaday, it's not my temperament. Right?
Yeah.
It is not my temperament.
Right. So another question. So here's the thing. When Sterling asked me to do this, he said, yeah, Adrian and I are going to give you a bunch of questions. And they didn't give me shit.
That's what we were thinking too.
Uh-huh. So we're just flailing, which is, if real Indians talking to each other is just going to be flailing anyway, just like anybody else, right? So, another thing that we did kind of talk about is just the style of how your books are. It still feels like just a novel, Kelli, but I've seen it described as like a novel in short stories. And, that's kind of a blurry line. And yours, Adrian wanted me to ask you about if you read a bunch of Russian novels because of the huge cast of characters and all the threads. And I couldn't really get my brain around that until I thought about it like comic books, the big like Secret Wars, and there's all this shit going on. So then it made sense to me, and just Brandon, like structure. Why do you make the choices you make to do things the way you do? And we'll start with you as far as the structure of your book and
Which book?
Either one.
Okay.
Well, I'm familiar with Where the Dead Sit Talking and the new one.
So yeah, Where the Dead Sit Talking, which is a phrase taken from Tracks. I was so nervous to see Louise Erdrich here. I had my bourbon and I said, Louise, I spilled my, hi, but that's Where the Dead Sit Talking is a phrase taken from the book Tracks. My love for her work. But the structure of that book,
See, you're
I'm being funny. The structure of that book is just a very linear, right? I mean, it's foster boy. The book opens, him going to a native boy going to a non-native foster placement. A girl dies in front of him. At some point, it's just that story, a man looking back at that story. So that, it's not, there's nothing difficult, but it's a very simple, I think certainly, James Welch has been an influence on me, and I think especially for that book, I was thinking a lot about Winter in the Blood in terms of style, simple. That's a book that I didn't want to do any kind of tricks or any, narrative devices or anything, postmodern or anything like that. I just wanted to tell a very simple story and try to do it as compelling as possible. Whereas my most recent book, The Removed, is structured with 4 different narrators, so it's very differently structured. Is your question, how did I decide how to structure?
Yeah, is there any particular thought process? You're saying you set out to write a book where you didn't want to use any,
Right. Yeah. No. I always have I think it always begins with a question, interrogating a question. What is home? What is home for the Cherokee? What are home for the tribes? So those kind of big questions. What is it? What is justice? What is justice today? Is it changed in 200 years? Those are big questions that I might talk about, with somebody at, late night or something. Those are the big questions, and that I think that fiction becomes a way for us to interrogate those questions and have conversations with somebody that sounds suspiciously like ourselves, right? We're having a conversation, or I do. I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but I feel like I'm. One of the questions in this interview that we did was why do you write? And that's what I was thinking about. Like, it's a way to have a conversation, right? And that conversation may be with myself. Sure. In a way, I'm entertaining myself, or I'm interrogating the question, whatever that, and certainly for Where the Dead Sit Talking was what is home? What is home for a foster child? And I wanted to write about a Native teenager who is struggling with their identity, their masculinity, in the 80s, wearing eyeliner, but also struggling with the idea of, am I Native enough? Which is a question I've always dealt with my whole life. Really, am I Native enough to be able to tell this story? And so all those, but on some level it's very simple because it's the linear timeline. It goes, over the course of, just a certain number of months. The Removed is over a week, but it's told through different narrators. I think that structure for me, and I tell this to students, right? In a novel, the most difficult thing for me, maybe you all feel like this, is the structure. Like I feel like I write. Do you all feel like this, like you write scenes? And I'm not sure where it goes in the book, but I'm writing a scene. Like, I may know where it's at the beginning, but I sometimes I don't know if you guys do this with vision, but one of the most difficult things I feel like is structuring. And I've worked with students. It's like let's totally restructure this novel, right? I don't know. I hope that I'm answering, addressing or interrogating this question. But anyway.
Yeah. Kelli, you have a very specific structure in Crooked Hallelujah.
Sure.
Do you think of it as a novel, or do you think of it as like a novel in short stories?
I hope that it is a novel, and I hope it's successful as a novel in stories, because I approached the book as story by story. So I didn't think often there's a pattern, like if we have a point of view of a certain character, it's going to be in first person and switch it up. And I focused on what I felt like each individual short story needed to be the best version of this short story. So sometimes you might meet a character in third person who's the main character in a story, and sometimes it might be in first So because that's how I approached it, when it was time to sit down and look, clearly I was working with the same places and same family, and there was an arc trying to be formed, I think. But I decided to go with, I played with other orders of the stories and structurally different things, but decided to go with a chronological order to help orient readers because of, I think, the challenge that would come with multiple points of view and meeting characters in different points of view and different, leaps in time and stuff. So to try to help the reader stick with it and not be so confused about timing, we went with chronological. My agent helped me put it together a lot. And help me with the big picture because I think that I'm a short story writer. I'm trying to write a more straightforward novel now, but so when people talk about the book as short stories, often that's when I'm a little bit like, yeah, sure, they're stories. Yeah. Those were stories, they weren't chapters. Right.
Tommy, you've written kind of a modern epic, as far as this big narrative with all of these characters. And, is that something that you found yourself in the middle of without realizing you were going there? And did you know who things weren't going to go well for, or did it just kind of play out the way it played out on its own? Because that happens too, right?
Sure. I learned writing the next book that having written the first book, sort of knowing the ending first and writing to where everyone was going was a crutch that I needed and didn't have in the next book. Because in figuring out what everyone's motivation is, Kurt Vonnegut has that line about everyone needs to want something in the story you're reading, and the reader needs to connect to what they want, even if it's a glass of water across the room, right? So in there, everyone's going to the powwow. Easy, sort of through line when I'm editing and revising and thinking about what is their motivation, what is clarifying their connection. Everyone's going to the powwow. That worked. And in the next book, to not have that sort of plot device element or crutch sort of kicked my ass in trying to write this next book. What is the connective tissue? What parallels are happening? Where am I repeating myself in themes that I already talked about in the first book? So, I thought of the plot for There a month after I found out I was gonna have a son, and it was a very convenient plot device to have. And I thought of the next book 3 months before There came out. And there was no clever device or guiding element for me to figure out what am I gonna write this toward. I was in Sweden, because the book, I had a tour that went to Italy and Amsterdam and Sweden. Italy got cut off because my car got robbed on the way to the airport in Oakland, and they took all of my stuff, my suitcase, my backpack with my laptop, my passport, everything. Oakland just took me. And I thought the whole trip was gonna be off, but I got a fast passport thing that happened. And I was in Sweden getting a guide through a museum tour. I don't know if anyone else has had this experience, but there's this woke museum guide experience where they're we know we shouldn't have this stuff, but we have it still, and we're all talking about it. And they showed me all this Cheyenne stuff that they have, and they're we don't know what to do with it. So it was this woke tour, and during that tour I saw a newspaper clipping that said Southern Cheyennes in St. Augustine, Florida. And I was I know enough about our history, because I'm Southern Cheyenne specifically, like I'm enrolled in Cheyenne Arapaho tribes of Oklahoma, but there's a lot of breakdowns within that. And okay, I was like, okay, why were we in St. Augustine, Florida? And this led me to like a big part of the next book, which is we were like, Southern Cheyennes were half of the population at a prison castle in St. Augustine, Florida, which was the first continental European established place that they colonized. And there was this prison castle where Richard Henry Pratt got the idea for the boarding schools based on his experience with these prisoners. So like we were the seeds for the boarding schools, which happened in 1875. And this happened because I went to Sweden and saw this random newspaper clipping. Wow. This is the mess that the new novel is versus the one that I had the seed of the idea, like everyone's got to go to the powwow. Like that was the idea, like a very easy way to write everybody. And the next one was like, okay, this is like wicked seeds from a prison castle in Florida. How does that influence what actually happened to everyone at the powwow? And so it has become like a prequel and a sequel, sort of like a book 1 and 3, and there's like book 2 is sort of how it's ended up.
I'm curious, did they feed you in Sweden? Because that was going around like on the internet recently about how, like if you're at somebody's house in Sweden, they sit down to dinner, they like shove you off to the side and they don't feed you?
No, it was like an IKEA cafeteria, honestly. Like I was, before the museum tour, like we were in a cafeteria setting and there was a lot of bratty kids and we were all eating meatballs. Cool.
Brandon, you mentioned Louise's work as being something that was very important to you. And that's one of the things that I'm always curious about is like those seed books, that whether it's one that you always go back to or if it's one that kind of kicked the door open for you as far as whether you're wanting to be a writer or a reader or anything related to kind of who you are sitting here like on the stage right now. I mean, Louise came in and sat down in front of me and I just suddenly remembered how I'd read an interview with her, and it might even be in one of her nonfiction pieces about this book, The Falcon, which that she had read to her children. It's about John Tanner, this guy who was kidnapped as he's a white kid, kidnapped as a boy by the Shawnee and then sold to the Ojibwe, and he grew up Ojibwe. And his autobiography, as told to this writer, is like one of those snapshots that we have the most, that tells us the most of what life was like at that time among the Ojibwe people. And of course, I bought that book because if it's Louise Erdrich's favorite book, it's got to be my favorite book too, and how that plays forward, because in that book, John Tanner is talking about this chief Little Clam, who is actually Little Shell the First, which has these connections to the people that I am part of now. And I did not know that 15 years ago, or however long it's been when I've read that. So these books that come into our lives and then like show up for different reasons down the road, that's one for me. And I'm just curious. We're at the James Welch Festival, so maybe it's a Jim Welch book, maybe it's something else. But I think most of us have those, don't we? Brandon, you're poised.
Well, it's real interesting because I never got an MFA. I never really had a mentor. It's really strange because I feel like I just found it on my own. I never had anybody, nobody in my family was like, you should read James Welch, right? You should read it. It's I just found it on, I don't know. It was just by the grace of, I don't know. I just found it early and it changed me. It had completely changed me at 19 or 20, right? Louise Erdrich too went on to read her books, and just, absolutely just, spoke to me. And I went on and got a PhD in English. I was much more interested in reading, Dante. I love Milton's Paradise Lost and biblical-based, works, and Cervantes, Don Quixote. I love that old stuff. One of the things we were talking about the other day is the Western Canon, and it tells you what a boring nerd I am. I was at the gym listening to Harold Bloom instead of music. It's just like, I'm not going to listen to music at the gym. I'm going to walk on the treadmill, listen to Harold Bloom, right? Who's the old white guy, Sterling professor of humanities at Yale for many years, and published 37 books or something. I don't know, all on, Western Canon and what to read, and listen to all these interviews. And he didn't have any native writers on. In fact, I think he had Toni Morrison, but Song of Solomon was the book, right? I'm not trying to, may he rest in peace. I'm not trying to, come down on him. I feel like I'm so honored up here because I feel like I'm with two writers, Tommy Orange and Kelli Jo Ford, who are changing the Western Canon, right? And certainly following, and Louise Erdrich is part of the Western Canon, absolutely, yeah. And that has not been acknowledged. It has not been with N. Scott Momaday, with James Welch, with Louise Erdrich. I mean, maybe it has, maybe I'm not, but it should be more, right? I mean, I could talk about this for a long time, but I feel like things are starting to finally change now, right? And which is a very good thing. What was your original question? I'm on brain fog. I don't know.
He prefaced that we were flailing at the beginning of all this.
Right, yeah, that's my brain is.
How about you, Tommy? Do you have like a seminal thing? Was there a door kicker for you? Was there a life-changing experience with a book or a writer that?
I would honestly credit James Welch with the birth of my son.
Do we want to hear this story? This is a family. We'll go there, but.
I was working at the Native American Health Center in Oakland, and there was a book club that we were all trying to start, as a friend group, and only me and my now wife showed up, and Winter in the Blood was the book. The rest is history, so to speak. Yeah. Whistles, etc.
Cool. Kelli, you have something?
Yes. I'm embarrassed to talk about how much I love medicine if Louise is still here, but you are. I've talked about this so much, but so Love Medicine was my touchstone when I was working on Crooked Hallelujah for many years. So it was kind of my inspiration book when I just needed a nudge and I could just pick it up and read, and I just needed to feel the magic and something to attain to that would be unreachable, just to be inspired. And it was also something that I studied. So, I took it with me to like all the, I would take like a picture of when I was little, my mom, my great-grandmother, and my grandmother and I, like one of those Sears portraits.
Yeah.
Like the four of us, and I would take Love Medicine, and then I would take whatever else I was working with at the time. And I would have them at whatever desk I found myself at. So that book, thank you for all of your body of work, but especially that one. That's my heart book, so thank you.
Thank you for that.
I just quick shout out to Luis also. Roundhouse, which is a later book, it happened in time with this moment when I was thinking that getting ideas and telling story, like, all need to happen at the same time to honor the reader, and that there is no reader without the writer, and that it's a communal experience. I was reading Roundhouse and what she was doing in Roundhouse with story and ideas and like transcending that both of those things were happening and just making this experience of what reading can be. Roundhouse for me was a moment while I was going to IIA and really like thinking about what is industry, what is artistry, what is idea, what is the reader. Like that book, because it happened at this particular moment, like that book was a moment too. So, Louise.
Books and Islands in Indian Country. Is that the title of it? That's my Louise book, just so you know, since I didn't want to be left out on that. Time-wise, Sterling, did you round up a bunch of audience questions? Or because we've got more up here, but I don't want to go too late, and I don't want to miss any opportunities for people to have asked questions. Sterling's mic is quiet, thankfully, but we probably need it.
It's a sign.
We have questions.
Okay.
But I need a. Hello? There we go. So, yeah, I mean, we've got questions to take us. Since we're just going to, this is actually a powwow now, we'll go till 1. Yeah, I have some good questions, so we can start on those if you want.
Yeah, let's do it. I mean,
Okay.
I turn into a pumpkin at about 10:15, so.
Hold on. Let's see. Well, this is the most important question. This is for all the writers. What's your favorite color?
Okay.
Hey, no, really, we want to hear this first, and then we'll move on to other, perhaps less important questions. Well, oh, okay, man, I'm just going to cut you off.
Blue-green.
Okay.
Are we answering?
I didn't think he was serious.
I like blue
No.
and I like green, so.
I like a combination of two colors, the dark turquoise and a blood red.
Tommy, you're supposed to say orange.
I guess I like black a lot and red, black and red. Moving on.
No, this is important. This is important.
Where's Sterling?
This is a question that says for Tommy Orange, but actually I think this is interesting for everybody, and I think this is particularly interesting for Indian writers because, well, you'll know why. Like, what was your family's reaction to your book?
I'm sorry, I missed did you say it was particularly for me?
Well, it says for Tommy, but I think it's for all of you, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, in my opinion.
Sure, I can answer that. So my dad, he's like one of the only living fluent language speakers of a particular Southern Cheyenne dialect. He said to me, I skipped to the end. He's not a reader. I didn't grow up around readers. No one ever handed me a book. My mom loves the book. One of my sisters loves the book. The other one's also not a reader. So I didn't grow up in a family of readers. I had to clear when I got a chapter published in the New Yorker as a short story. They fact-checked the fiction, and I had to get screenshots of text messages with my family saying it was cool that I said stuff about them. So everyone's really happy with the success and with the telling of our story. They honestly want me to do more in the telling of our story. My family has been through a lot and we're weird, and I think they get validation from me talking about it. So it was never a question. It was never something that they were don't talk about that. It's a family of addicts and fundamentalists and fanatics. and everyone's like reaction has been, for the most part, supportive, if like sometimes empty.
I almost heard nothing but static after the words fact-checked the fiction. What does that even mean? Sterling, did they fact-check your fiction at the New Yorker?
You know, they did, but I don't remember what it was. But as soon as Tommy said it, I was like, yeah, the same thing happened to me. But it was stuff that we're like, we don't know. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to tell you. Like, it's true. It's like I don't remember what it was that they fact-checked, but they did.
I mean, I wrote it in the second person. I'm like, I'm talking about you.
VQR fact checks fiction as well.
They fact check
I'm holding
poetry.
my skull together right now.
They fact check poetry.
Wow. Am I the only one who thinks that's really weird? You guys are like, yeah, they fact check poetry. You're not a poet, though. You're not deeply offended.
No, I just heard from somebody after I was having a conversation with a poet friend, and I was like, they fact checked the fiction. He was like, no, they fact checked my poetry.
This is the most like crazy thing I've heard after 4 days of being around Indians and stuff. I can't, that's just weird to me. Do you want to answer the original question, Kelli?
Sure. My family has been, hi Mom. I think that they're maybe watching. My family's been extremely supportive. I think my mom might have ordered books almost for the whole town. And that was really, really important, because there's a lot of stuff that, it's certainly fiction, but a lot of it hits pretty close to home probably. I think it's a great act of parental love to be like, oh, can be a lot to read, and I love you, and I want to support you, and I want to lift you up, and I want to shout your name from the rafters, but not just my mom, my whole family, really. My aunt was like, I stayed up all night reading it, and then I just wanted to read it again, and it's like, oh, thank you. I feel like they're the people in my life I want to, I'm almost 50, and I want to make them proud.
Sure. Brandon?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, define family, I guess. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I mean, I think that's why it's an interesting question, because Indians tend to have a very, very different definition of family than most non-natives do, and I think that sometimes that results in a different kind of pressure, and that's why I think I'm curious. That's why I think it's a good thing to hear from you guys.
Is my therapist here?
You got another one, Sterling?
Yeah. I do. Let's see. This is a sort of I don't know, a pragmatic or technical question, but I think I'm always interested in hearing this from people. Do you have any advice for any aspiring authors regarding time management and burnout?
I'm going to listen on this one.
I think there's a lot of judgment around audiobooks. Like you're not really reading if you're listening. I've been listening to books for a long time. Not like on cassette tapes, I'm not that old.
I am.
But the listening experience, in terms of time management, as it relates to time management, I have moments where I'll remember where I was when I was listening to a moment in a novel that are more powerful than moments when I'm reading the thing. And I just think there's a lot of judgment about what the eyes are doing versus what the ears are doing and the processing that's happening. I think there are certain books that need to be read for sure, but in terms of time management and ways to, because I believe that reading is a big part of writing, and Luis had mentioned this the other night, like you can hear the influence of another writer. You absorb the energy of people, of writers that you love, of literature that you love, of experiences that you love and are impactful to you. And what you absorb ends up in your writing. That is just a part of the fact that you love it. It's not something that you're controlling. There's a part of your unconscious that is imbuing your writing with meaning based on the fact that you love certain things. And so if there's a number one thing that saves time, because I think reading is a part of writing in a big way, listen to books. You can scam Audible in a big way. They're very forgiving. You listen to the book, you return it, pay $14.99 a month, say. I've done this for years. You get a bunch of books, and then you return them and say you didn't like the narrator. And there's just a big corporation, you know, I mean, come on. The guy's making so much money. Bezos, or whoever his replacement was, nobody's being hurt by this action. It's just for your enrichment in your life. And there are ways you can scam corporations that's not hurting anybody. I've been doing this for years. So, Audible, listen to books. It's a time saver, and it's a great way to experience books.
This is the content we're here for.
I have to say, once a bookseller, always a bookseller. Libro FM, you can buy books. That's the indie version. So like if you're too afraid of the man to scam them, like Tommy, you can get them from Libro. You can buy them so that like your local bookstore, like Fact and Fiction, gets a cut. So if you're on Audible, like if the lights are flashing behind you, you can still scam them because, you know, yeah, Libro FM, indie version of Audible. They're all the same books. So, yeah.
Don't
once a
scam
bookseller-
them.
No, don't scam them. Scam Audible. Maybe create a different account to scam Audible, but the ones like you want to keep forever and you want to help out your indie bookstore, get on Libro. Yeah.
I just want to say, you can make endless amounts of Gmail accounts and sign up on Audible and get the free trial. You can do this endlessly. They don't know how to stop it. It just takes a little bit of like, you know, I've been doing it for years.
And if you really want to go deep, use a Hotmail account. Because then they'll think you're 70 or 80 and they don't know how to use the internet anyway.
Hey, man, David Wyden still has a Hotmail account. It's amazing to me when I come across people who have Hotmail accounts. I saw Dave's and I was like, damn, that's the real shit. Okay, here's our next one. If you could tell your past self one thing about where you are now and the future, what would it be?
I can't hear anything.
What would you tell your past self if you could tell your
About
past
where you
self?
are now.
What's like, which age do you mean? Like my 5-year-old self, I would tell something different to my 13-year-old self, my 18-year-old self.
I don't know.
I wish I like fell in love with books earlier. Like I had no teacher who was like, you need to read this. I had no person in my life in my family or no friends like, this book will connect with you. So I wish, if I could go back, I guess, I wish I fell in love with reading way earlier. I didn't start reading until I was like 22. I didn't finish a novel in high school. Like I was not a reader until well after I graduated from college when I started reading. So I wish I knew earlier what it was.
I don't know. I think I would just give past self a big hug and say, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. It was really scary leading up to publishing the book because it was such a personal story that was springing to life in fiction, and I didn't know if it was okay to, there was one point where I was just like, I wish I'd written any other book but this, and so it's gonna be okay. You'll wade through ride through those moments, and you'll still be standing. People are still gonna love you.
I think I would tell myself, I was a junior or senior in high school, to tell my mom. My mom she went up to the school to kick the ass of my English teacher. She was going up there to kick her ass. Because the English teacher accused me of plagiarism and sat me in the hallway, and I got sat in the hallway in high school. And then she later apologized. Oh, it wasn't plagiarized, right? But that took my mom to go up there to I think I would say, it's gonna be all right. Right? Chill out. I don't know, I have very good memories of reading very young with my mom, sitting on my mom's lap and her reading aloud to me. So I think that I was certainly encouraged, but I didn't read a whole lot either. I don't think until a little bit later. But again, the lack of mentorship, right? The lack of someone just saying, why not read that? This is what this book is about, right? I do that with my sons. I never had anybody that did that to me, right? Young. Read this. But I loved reading when I was little. I remember going up 2 flights at the public library in Oklahoma, going up one flight, statue of Abraham Lincoln sitting there, turning and going up the other flight, and getting down on my knees and looking at the children's books. It's such a nice memory, right? And so, is my therapist here?
Quickly, this is a kind of public service announcement. One of the first native books that I read was Education of Little Tree.
Oh, yeah.
And if everyone is still talking about this as a native book or teaching it or telling people to read it, it was written by a KKK member. He's not Cherokee, and it's an insane story, and there's a podcast about it, and his name's Asa Carter. He came out as Forrest Carter, I think. So this was one of the first native books that I read. This was along my path of reading, was this is what was there. So everyone go out and find out about the guy who wrote Education of Little Tree was very intensely racist and a KKK member.
What's the name of the podcast? Do you remember?
I think one of the NPR affiliate type things did it. I don't remember.
Speaking of, for just a minute, children's literature, right? Because I think we're seeing some more great native children's literature books. And I have in the spring, one of the, we were talking about this the other day at lunch, and I feel very strongly about this, right? That where I think we've failed in the country is not providing our kids with books that challenge them to think and understand culture, understand native culture, and that for many years now, I was listening to the interview with the January 6th attacks, and one of the guys said, I don't know, I was just doing what the president said. Why did you storm, right? I don't know. I was just doing what our leader told us, right? Instead of, there's a great scene in Alice in Wonderland where Alice stands up to the Red Queen says, "Off with her head." Alice stands up and she says, "Who are you but a pack of cards," right? she's, challenging what she's being, and I just feel like that's been lost for so long. And I don't want to come down on fantasy or anything, or any genre, but literature for children that should really get them to think about challenging, right? To get them to think about things, right? Because otherwise you lose your democracy and you have people storming the Capitol. And you know what I mean? So, I don't know.
So, you all, teach as well, right? What do you think? Do you think it's a curriculum thing? Like when you talk about not getting interested in reading until you were 20, I don't think you said how old you were, but that you weren't a big reader when you were younger. Do you think, how much of that was because of what you were being asked to read when you were in middle school or high school? Do you think that could change? I mean, would it have helped you, if you weren't, presumably we all kind of grew up reading kind of the same 20 books, right? As far as what English programs would have us read. Do you think would that have made it any different for you?
Sometimes I feel envious of these times, and if I would have just been given the right book. Yeah. And sometimes I'm like, but there was Spider-Man on TV, and there was running around, and there were sports, and my brain had not been myelinated. Sometimes I'm like, I wasn't a bright kid. I have talked. I was at an event at UC Berkeley, and I had my first and second grade and third grade teacher in the audience, and I was like, I didn't show any promise, guys, right? I wasn't. Nobody would have predicted this. I was not a bright kid. This was a fluke. So sometimes I'm I wish I would have been turned on to something earlier, and sometimes I'm timing is everything. Yeah. So I don't know. I think what's happening right now in young adult fiction is really revelatory for the youth, and the sort of the unconscious undercurrent of white lives matter more that happens with teaching only white lives in literature, in history. The way it can happen in education is super powerful, and I'm sure it would have been changed by it. So I think that's a really cool thing that's happening, and I think I would have been affected by it.
Sterling?
Well, here's where we're at. I got two questions here, I think, but if we're also at, near the end here, do you want to answer two or just go with one? It's your call.
No, go for it.
Okay. The last one is really simple. It's basically a 1 or 2 word answer, but we'll go with the other one first. For emerging Native writers, what is some of the best advice you can offer them?
Best advice to emerging authors.
Native authors.
Native authors.
Find your mentors, write and keep writing, reading widely. That's my best advice is find your people. It's really, really inspiring to and it's an honor to get to work at IAI and the students and seeing the community that, they form. There are students here who are currently in the program. There's a group of students here who've graduated, and try to find your people and do the thing.
Yeah, on the same note, find what connects to you. There's so much new Native content happening right now. We're in the second season of 2 amazing Native TV shows. Find the new stuff that's saying the new thing about being Native, because that's how you feel. And that's how people who read Native Lives right now, they need to understand how we feel right now and in the future moving forward. We've been over produced as a historical people in an insane way. And we're just now being acknowledged that we're like, oh, we're here and we're contemporary. And so find the stuff right now that is speaking to you and figure out the way that you can speak into that same sort of thread of a movement that's happening right now about us reclaiming our own voices and being in native writing rooms and being native animators and being native young adult novel writers and throw out anything that you don't like. Find the stuff that you like and be vigilant in that.
And I would add too that, sticking with it. I mean, Sterling Harjo has been a director for a long time. It's not like he just, is a popular show right now, but he's been doing it for a long time. Doing it for the right reasons, in the way, my mom is a painter, and she just paints for herself, and I think about that, right? I mean, I think, at some point, maybe we do have an audience, but early on, I've been writing for a long time. I'm 52, and I started writing at like 20, where I felt like I'm really love writing, and I'm 20 years old. I'd love to write a book someday. It's been a long time, and I feel like just now am I sort of, that's not the way with everybody, but I know a lot of people in graduate school who are like, screw it, and they gave up, like really good writers. When I was doing my doctorate, some really good writers that, and they're doing it for the wrong reasons. They're doing it for the ego, right? And the ego is very bad, I think, for the writing. I think it's bad, just ego is bad in general. And I think you create art for yourself because there's that passion to do it. And one of the things I love about writing a book, or a story is you're just sort of crafting it and watching it. Don DeLillo has a great metaphor for writing fiction in his book, his novel, Mao Tu, and that metaphor is in an early draft, like there's a baby, right? And it's like an early draft of a story or a book, and at first the baby is real messy, and you're having to clean it up and feed it and take care of it, and then pretty soon it's crawling on its own, and then soon it's walking, and soon it's it becomes alive, right? Which is a good way of thinking about the writing process, right? The drafting process. And so that for me becomes like just working on the new stuff feels alive, and I just, that's more important than anything else. Do it for yourself, right? And I think if you stick with it, as a teacher of mine, a novelist, Stuart Onan, who's a great writer, said, the ones who stick with it are the ones who make it. So.
No one's asking me, but I'm going to answer that question too, because I get asked that question a lot. What do you tell new writers? And I always say, don't be a dick. That's a huge one, because, be easy to work with. If somebody helps you, help somebody else. Pay things forward. Show up on time, even if it is Indian time, because nobody breaks through, gets asked to do things like this without help. And often that help is just the network of this very, very tiny world. It's a tiny international world as far as writers are concerned. And if you earn a reputation as someone who's hard to work with or has the ego that Brandon's talking about, then you're not going to have people helping you. We're not all crawling, fighting over each other to get to the top of a mountain that there's a room for only a couple people. And that's, Jim Welch went to schools and paid it forward, and Louise Erdrich and all these people, there's a reason they're beloved, because they're good people. And do everything you can to be a good person, not only because it will help you succeed, but also that's just the way you should be anyway. And it's very easy not to, especially if you start getting a few successes and you don't want that to happen. The change from you want the success, but you want it in a good way, which is an Indian way, good way, right? I just went full Indian there looking at Sterling.
It's good. Somebody needed to say it in a good way, and you know, you finally did it, Chris. So here we are. Now this is finally an Indian festival. Okay, last question. What's one book you would say people should read?
It's one book, everyone.
One book to read.
Well, there's that one book that Sterling can't finish. I think it's going to be really good, honestly. I've read a part of something he sent me, whether or not it ends up in the book or not. Sterling is a very talented fiction writer, and I can't wait for his book to come out. I'm being completely honest. If ever, here comes Louise. If you all have not read The Sentence, it is incredible, and she was able to include the pandemic, which is insane to try to do right after, to have the vision and the ability to write about something right outside of it. The Sentence is amazing as a book. So.
Also, I'm staying on the Louise Erdrich train here because the short story, The Stone, that was in the New Yorker is just unbelievable. Like when I got to the end of that story, and I think I had my IA students read that, Jessica and Conley and that group. I don't know if they're here, but, oh, there you are, okay. Yeah. Remember The Stone? Yeah. All right, yeah. Unbelievable. You get to the end of The Stone, it just blew it. I mean, just unbelievable, right? So, I'm staying on that, which I hope will be collected in a collection at some point, right? It's a beautiful, beautiful story.
I hope to God those sons of bitches didn't fact check her fiction.
Did they, Louise?
Did they fact check your fiction?
Did they fact check you at the New Yorker?
They wanted to title The Plague of Doves, The Plague of Pigeons. Sons of bitches. Kelly, what's yours?
Well, is it awkward if we all just name different Erdrich books?
Yes.
I love medicine, obviously, but I'll say Morgan Talty has a new collection out. If you haven't read A Night of the Living Res, it's really wonderful. It's a powerful, sharp, funny, sad. It's good. It's good. It's a linked collection. He's really good short story writer. Tells a really good, bigger story over the course of the book.
Cool. So is that it, Sterling? We done? All right. Well, thank you, guys.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you, guys.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
And there's a table up here where you can still buy everyone's books. Thank you so much for coming. For the whole weekend, Sterling, come out and take a bow, Sterling.
One last thing I want to say here before everybody takes off. It's something I forgot to talk about earlier in the festival, but it's, is that we've got a couple, we have this really incredible piece of art here from John Peppian that we commissioned for the festival. Obviously that's, John's image of Jim there. Yeah, John's an incredible artist. He's Blackfeet. And he's a friend of mine, and there's just something about, and it's also ledger art, which is incidentally directly connected to what Tommy was talking about earlier with the Cheyennes and the Arapahoes and the Kiowas that ended up in Florida in that prison. It's an extremely interesting and complicated moment of American history. And John is one of the foremost practitioners in the US of what we now call ledger art. And if Lois had been able to come here tonight, but she was too tired, if Lois had been able to come here tonight, we were actually going to have her up here on stage with the others when they got their blankets, and we were going to gift her the image. It's been framed, and so I'll just have to give it to her privately. A couple other things. You've noticed a couple people running around here with cameras and videos, video cams, so on and so forth. Mike Huberman, where are you? Mike is our festival photographer back here. Mike, put your hand up so everybody can see you. Mike's from Fort Belknap, but so you can just forgive him for that part. And really appreciate Mike taking photos the last couple of days. The other guy we've got here is Jonathan Halpern. This is important. He's Jewish, which means we had all the tribes represented here. And we picked up both Mike and Jonathan in the last 2 weeks. I feel really, really grateful that these guys did unbelievable work in the last couple of days. They sacrificed basically all of their personal time to this festival, and we have some incredible video and photo record of this last few days. And eventually it is going to be up online, and I'm really excited about that. This is my traditional notebook here. There are still copies of Louise's most recent book, The Sentence, back there on the table. Those are free, or you can give a donation for them. It's a reminder that any donations you give right now go toward the next festival, toward the start of the James Welch reading series, which will help us bring writers into Missoula for the reading series, and also toward the James Welch Native Comedy Night, which we're starting. And I think just at the even though she's not here right now, I just want to say again, like, I'm so grateful to Louise, to Lois Welch for being on board with this and being on the organizing committee with us for the last year and a half, and providing input, and also just telling us a lot of stories about Jim, which is a really just very special experience for all of us. And that is it. Thank you so much for making this first festival a reality. We'll see all of you back here soon. Good night.